camera, silence! Ready. Action!
A village in India, not far from Gandhi's birthplace.
Action!
They're making a play here, but it's not like most plays for television. Only the technicians are TV professionals. All the actors and actresses are villagers. The playwright is another villager.
Okay, cut it.
Most important of all, the play is about something of life and death concern to the people of this village and the thousands of other villages across India. It's about bride burning, the terrifying practice still current in India of murdering by fire brides who have not brought enough dowry wealth to their new in-laws. The writer of this play heard of a recent bride burning in his village. He hopes that when his play is seen by villagers on community TV sets in the area, it will help to change attitudes and put an end to the awful custom. The play they're making here in Shakti village is an alarmingly relevant example of what serious television drama can aim to do. The same local station has made plays with villagers about problems of caste and arranged marriage. And the people involved with this play have clear views about the purpose of television drama.
If we want to change society, then through this drama format, we can change. Not immediately, but slowly.
Villagers who watch this will certainly think against burning and not behave like that.
For the villagers of Shakti, a television play is much more than an entertainment. In this community, TV drama can be a weapon for change. We'll be returning here later for the surprising final act of the bride-burning drama. Meanwhile, this program is about television plays and what the television world has made of them. Entertainments and escapes, political promptings, second-hand theatre, and sometimes even a kind of television art.
She's gone.
This is how it all began.
Didn't you see her?
July the 14th, 1930, the first television play in Britain, an experimental BBC production of Pirandello's Man with a Flower in His Mouth. By the end of the 1930s, the BBC had transmitted nearly 400 plays. Most were adaptations from the theatre, but television was also beginning to find its own voice. This is a recreation of a scene from a 1939 production. Written by John Pudney and called Chance of a Lifetime, this was one of the first pieces of drama to be commissioned especially for television. The half-hour play is a jolly romp about Plum Damson, the village baker. Plum is a keen gambler, and he's anxious to dispose of his 3 unmarried sisters.
Well, thanks, Flo. Let's be off. Night all.
Good night now.
You know, there's nothing as exasperates me so much as the clack of women.
You better get married then, Plum. Cure yourself. It's time there was a marriage over at your place.
Yeah, I'd say it was time. With nothing but the clack of women, morning, noon and night. It's too much for me, that's what it is. Nobody can work with it all on his hands.
Wow. Why don't you raffle them, Plum? There's plenty of young fellers coming here could do with one of them.
We'll be damned if I don't raffle one of them before long.
Good evening. This is Ed Hurley speaking for the makers of Kraft Mayonnaise.
As television and television drama were revived after the war, producers on both sides of the Atlantic maintained a cautious loyalty to the theatre. In America, the Kraft Television Theatre featured creakingly theatrical transplants from the Broadway stage. The Royal Family, a 1948 production, is a theatrical offering as artificial as its painted backcloth.
Fanny, have you read the play?
My dear brother, I read it and died in the second act. Joe, why are you wearing those silly boxing gloves?
Well, I've been sparring with Miss Julie. She says it improves her timing.
Joe, can we put the food up for lunch? Are those for me? No, they're for Mother.
And thanks to Tal,
In America in the early 1950s, after years of government restraint and virtual stagnation, television suddenly took off. The new audience were mostly well-off and often keen on theatre. They were treated to what's still remembered as the golden age of television drama.
The golden age of television was golden largely in the sense of opportunity. It's an awful lot of drama. In the 50s, television was still new and exciting, and everybody watched. You would walk down the street the next day, and you'd hear people talking about it. I mean, nothing like that ever happened that came out of Broadway. Nothing like that really much happened coming out of movies. It was very exciting. You had a sense of an audience, and you had a sense that what you did was needed.
They rehearsed them like plays. They treated the writers like playwrights. The show went on, and it was an event. I mean, you got phone calls afterwards.
At the same time, you had the feeling of the opening night, because you knew it was only one time. And if anything went wrong, you had better know how to cover it and better know what you were doing, what the situation was about, or you were lost. So that fear, I think, of failure generated a lot of energy that I think made a lot of shows give it kind of lift up on the screen.
In the early 50s, American TV drama became a training ground for a generation of future stars. But the big rewards were still to come.
John Harrington, that's all.
The young actor looking in the mirror got £100 for this part. His name is Jack Lemmon.
Gee, that sounds pretty good.
Another hopeful called Walter Matthau got £25 for 2 lines. A part as Plato earned £70 for a newcomer called Paul Newman.
Citizen Plato, I wonder if you would...
Not right now, please.
Introducing Robert Redford.
It was golden in opportunity, and it was unique. There was never anything like it before, and there's never been anything like it since. Nor will be again.
And once in a while, something went like that, like rockets. It was terrific.
You have a bachelor on your hands. I ain't never going to get married.
In May 1953, the golden age of American TV drama produced one of those rockets. Marty by Paddy Chayefsky became an instant classic. It made a star of Rod Steiger and established Chayefsky's mastery over what he called the marvelous world of the ordinary.
So she gives me the brush off. So I think I'm past the point of being hurt, so I get hurt. Now, this is some broad I didn't even want to call up, you know. No, Mom, that's the history of my life. Not for me. I don't want to go to the Wave Ballroom. None of those places. They stand around and make me feel like I'm a bug. You know, I got feelings, too, and had enough pain. No, thank you.
Marty.
Mama, please, I'm going to stay home, and I'm going to watch Sid Caesar.
You're going to die without a son.
So then I will die without a son.
Marty, put on the blue suit.
Mom, it's a blue suit or the gray suit. I'm a fat little man, a fat, ugly little man.
You're not ugly.
That's what I am. I'm ugly, ugly on Mama. Please, now, would you please leave me alone? Now, what do you want from me? One felt things were going good. You know, I call it the wind through my stomach was good. It's an expression I have. I put instinct first when I act and intellect second. When I need my intellectual capacity, whatever that may be, when instinctively something hasn't gone right.
Nightmare.
Tension.
Perspiration.
Pressure.
Vomiting.
Almost panicked. Terribly nervous. The scenery fell down.
What the heck's going on?
Under the intense pressures of live TV drama, there were inevitably as many disasters as masterpieces. But more than mere technical problems threatened the golden age.
Joe? Joe? I'm lonely.
Within a couple of years, America's golden age of television drama began to fade.
Honey? Have a little drink with me, please?
I can't take a drink, baby.
By 1957, plays like Days of Wine and Roses, starring Cliff Robertson and Piper Laurie as a couple struggling with alcoholism, were becoming a rarity. TV drama had moved from New York to Hollywood, and the marvelous world of the ordinary was out of fashion, as TV journalist Les Brown recalls.
A lot of these writers who were writing in that golden age of television weren't writing happy, pleasant things. They were writing tragic things, and they were writing about people who were roughed up by life generally. And Hollywood was able to produce a much glossier kind of product that was more compatible with the aims of the advertiser.
Elijah's lot. I want you to hit the rabbi.
By 1960, when Robert Redford, in his first big TV part as a Nazi soldier, confronted Charles Lawton in a play about the Warsaw Ghetto, time had almost run out for the Golden Age.
Less than something like that. And as for you, my young sergeant, we'll have a talk about this. You understand?
Jawohl, Kapitän. Rather violent sentiment, but a compelling argument, don't you think?
Soon, Redford was featuring in the action film series The Untouchables and a new kind of TV drama.
I appreciate that, Benny. But then I never gave you the chance, did I?
It was the death of live television. It was, in a way, the death of really good dramatic television, because everything went on film.
And it went to film because film could be distributed. And there was more money in that form. So that film could be sent to television stations all over the world.
They began to develop a kind of a formula, a certain amount of spilling over the top of the gown, a certain amount of female pulchritude properly displayed, a few car chases, a few gun shots, and so forth. And they learned that by doing these things, they could get more viewers and have a sure shot than they could by taking chances with these little plays. I mean, I think it's just simple matter of the marketplace did us in.
I don't think anyone anticipated there would be this furore.
One unfortunate woman died during transmission.
I believe even the Prime Minister was involved.
There were really hundreds, perhaps 1,000 phone calls to the BBC.
I don't think there's anything to compare quite with the impact at that time that play had. I don't think anything has happened since. So it's awfully nice in a way to be really a part of a television history, because that at the time really did make history.
Do you remember something that O'Brien said? We are the dead.
We are the dead.
You are the dead.
The BBC's production of George Orwell's 1984 provoked the biggest response in British TV history to that date, and the biggest row.
No movement until you are ordered.
It was only an hopeless
Orwell's chilling story of a totalitarian future shocked a country only recently recovering from the traumas of war.
The house is surrounded. I suppose we may as well say goodbye.
You may as well say goodbye.
Here was someone suddenly saying, now don't get too smug because you've won the war, because you're going to lose the peace. And if you do, this is what's going to happen. If you let it happen, then you might as well write everything off.
I've always thought television was the equivalent to the Victorian father reading to his family. If we go in and take something which is frightening or startling or shocking because they hadn't thought of it, then there is this astonishing result.
Parliament was, it was brought up into the House as to whether it should be repeated, and the press were either for or against. I believe even the Prime Minister was involved.
Prince Philip was reported to have said, "The Queen and I watched the play and thoroughly enjoyed it. We are on the side of the BBC in the controversy." So that helped, of course, a great deal with the BBC high-ups.
Here comes a candle to light you to bed. Here comes a chopper to chop off your head. Take the woman first.
Not the Ministry of Love! Not there! Winston! Winston!
Marco Magri said on Panorama, "Isn't it better that television should tell the truth and not be used either as fantasy or a drug? If it is to be of any use to mankind, that is the only thing that matters."
In the late 50s, Japan produced its own golden age of television drama. A sudden rush of plays about the most relevant and sensitive themes in Japanese life. This was The Pioneer, a play called I Want to Be a Seashell. Made in 1958, it's the story of how a simple barber was conscripted, ordered to kill injured American airmen, and then tried as a war criminal. Phone calls poured in from viewers expressing support for the play's anti-war theme. But the boldness of Japan's golden age was short-lived.
In Japan, unfortunately, many programs were killed off as a result of very strong political pressure. For one thing, the influence of television on the public began to be stronger than the politicians had expected. And the public began to be greatly enlightened by television, which was beginning to give the political authorities cause for alarm.
The tribunal finds that the defendant unlawfully and deliberately executed and killed the prisoner. The sentence of this tribunal is that he be hanged by the neck until dead. Kazuo Takita.
As the 50s drew to a close, Britain stirred towards major social changes. The patterns of life for ordinary people were shifting, reflected in the coming of independent television to break the long-established monopoly of the BBC. ITV quickly caught the changing mood by televising in 1956 the essential play of the angry young men generation, Look Back in Anger. But to one producer, most television drama seemed out of touch.
When I arrived in England, the drama on the air largely was not talking to its audience. The upper classes didn't give a damn about it. And yet here were the plays written by Terence Rattigan, Noel Coward, etc., about lovely upper class people and a sort of anyone for tea kind of, or anyone for tennis sort of situation. And here was this massive public buying television sets and not really seeing anything about their own lives.
For your Sunday night dramatic entertainment, we bring you Armchair Theatre.
So when I took over Armchair Theatre, I made up my mind that I would talk to my audiences. My audiences were working class people. And the best way to touch them was to dramatize their lives, not the anyone for tennis set. And to do that, it required original writing.
He said, I saw you play, Owen. I saw you play, Owen. Very good. Why don't you write for television? If Shakespeare was alive today, Owen, that's what he'd be writing for. Grab him the first few lines, Owen. So I said, yes, fine. She said, he said, well, what would you like to write?
What do you do with yourself round there in the evenings then?
Oh, we're going to Manchester or Salford sometimes if we can get...
For all the technical problems of live television, with a hand clearly visible feeding the camera cable behind the studio set, Lena, Oh My Lena, one of Alan Owen's first plays for Armchair Theatre in September 1960, broke new ground in British television drama.
Students' caps are yours, you know, it's lovely.
When I was working in Salford in a factory, this happened to me. So I wrote it.
Outside, shouting.
The story of a blundering student's obsession with a tough factory girl in a setting of northern industrial squalor was a startling novelty for British television audiences.
In television, it's the accidentals of daily life that were poetic and revealing and truthful. That's why I wanted to write for television.
Well, it makes a change, and a bit different.
You think that's why I like you?
Didn't know you did like me.
Oh, I do.
It's a free country. Long. Don't kiss me so hard, look, you bang me teeth. Here. Let me show.
It was quite unusual to have a love scene played by someone who spoke with a very sort of thick accent like that. And she said something like, oh, don't kiss me as hard as that, love. You bang my teeth. Well, I don't think any writer would have had the nerve to have broken what was supposed to be a romantic scene with a line like that.
Yes,
It sort of cut right across. I suppose it was getting down to the reality rather than to the romance of it all.
If you wanted me to sum up most of all what armchair theatre did in the 50s and the early 60s, I think that it had an enormous impact on social attitudes. I think that because you were able, with increasing boldness, as writers and as actors and producers, to present problems of human relationships on the screen to millions of people, made people understand, A, that they weren't alone in having those problems, and B, that it wasn't really so terrible to talk about them.
I want you, don't love him, you couldn't. What are you calling about love for? He's my fella. What about me? It was just a bit of fun. But it isn't anymore.
In the 60s and 70s, dramatized documentary, in its many variations, became a television growth industry. Bewilderingly labeled as drama doc, docudrama, dramatized reconstruction, or faction, it discovered a pedigree in Greek tragedy and even prehistoric cave painting. Drama doc has been employed by historical dramatists, popular storytellers, political activists, arts biographers, and investigative journalists. And the mix of drama and documentary has often meant trouble. Dramatized documentary has been condemned in Parliament as extremely dangerous. Campaigned against in America as unpatriotic, and attacked by critics round the world for confusing fact and fiction to smuggle documentary messages. It's clear that documentary drama has regularly been associated with the idea that television plays might promote social change. And some program makers insist that the hostility of critics is often political.
There's never any problem about saying, is this fact or fiction, if it's something which, by and large, reinforces the established order.
It never troubles us in the novel form, it never troubles us in cinema, it certainly never troubles us on the stage. Is this because our political masters are afraid that television actually penetrates into more areas, reaches more homes?
Far exceeding all other rows over the drama documentary phenomenon was the international uproar about Death of a Princess. Intriguingly, a film in part about the making of a drama documentary. Amid the headlines and the political storm of recalled ambassadors, trade boycotts, and cancelled Concorde routes, dramatized documentary was identified by the British Foreign Secretary as a dangerous form. It was TV's biggest row. In the beginning, however, dramatized documentary was a less controversial business. At the BBC from the late 40s, documentary dramatizations on themes like young offenders, alcoholism, and divorce were developed in the studios. One producer wrote, "The facts of life presented as story documentaries get across to a much wider section of the public than the straight talk. But there was another, more basic motive for dramatizing documentary subjects, as identified by producer Robert Barr.
There was no film available, and it had to be so scripted that actors could do it. I think it was quite wrong that this documentary, the thing that we were doing, got confused with drama simply because we were using actors. We weren't trying to sell, there was no propaganda or anything in it. This was what happened. It was more or less telling you that if you became a patient in a hospital, if you walked into a police station, if you were in a street accident, this is what would happen to you. So we weren't saying, get up and shout, don't let it happen to you.
In May 1964, the BBC screened Culloden, a stunning dramatized reconstruction by Peter Watkins of the last battle fought on British soil between the English army and the Scottish clans. The program broke fresh ground with its documentary techniques, exploiting the new lightweight film cameras. But it also announced an unmistakable political commitment in a way which was to become an important ingredient in many documentary dramas of the next decade.
James MacDonald, tacksman, senior officer in a ruthless clan system, who has brought with him onto the moor men whose land he controls. Alistair McWoodick, subtenant of a tacksman, owns 1/8 of an acre of soggy ground and 2 cows. Alan McCall, subtenant of a subtenant, owns half share in a small potato patch measuring 30 feet. Angus MacDonald, servant of a subtenant. He owns nothing. William Augustus, Duke of Cumberland, 3rd son of King George II. Age, 25 and 1 day. Commander-in-Chief of the Government Army in Scotland. Salary, £15,000 per year. Alexander Lang, private. Salary, 6pence a day.
Culloden was in part an exercise to prove to the BBC that Peter Watkins should make his next film The War Game. The War Game, a dramatised account of a nuclear attack, was judged too alarming to broadcast. Drama documentary was becoming troublesome.
Has there ever been a swinging scene like London?
In Britain, the boom euphoria of the swinging 60s proved fertile ground for the growth of relevant drama. A generation of writers and directors found powerful drama in the gap between the glitter of mid-60s Britain and the hard realities of working life. Jim Allen became a writer after working as a labour organiser.
I don't think plays or books or whatever are there to be read in between catching trains. Because of my political commitments, I wanted and did write about big social issues. When I entered television in '65, because of the political climate of full employment, of the boom economy, there was a liberal climate which enabled people like me to write plays I considered important. And we wanted to throw, and did throw, real people on the screen in real situations. So there was no send them to bed happy. There was an attempt to provoke thought. Disagree with us, fine.
There was the phenomenon of a lady called, what's her name, Mrs. Mary Whitehouse, who appeared on the scene, I think, for the first time in 1964. And she was a vociferous lady. I never thought it worthwhile paying any attention to her, least of all seeing her.
I mean, every Thursday morning there was a row on the front pages of the national papers about what had happened on the Wednesday plays, through the Wednesday plays, and there was an extraordinary insensitivity and crudeness, and so often too a certain political and social bias.
What I felt was that people had to be shown the unpleasant sides of life. One must get away from the middle-class who's for tennis type of drawing room drama to show the problems, of poverty, lack of housing and what have you, as in one famous example, Cathy Come Home. And one
and in people's minds. It can put items on the agenda. It can make people aware of issues which they hadn't thought of before, perhaps. And it can put ideas forward through people's experiences. But it can't change. It can't change anything in itself.
One senior convener on the docks or in forwards, in terms of social change, is worth 10 radical writers. Yeah? No question about it. We are just like the commentators, off-the-field commentators. We have a small, limited role, which is why the establishment can always absorb us. We're the icing on the cake. They permit us.
Now then, Fenby, where were we from yesterday? Cellos and basses?
Yes, I think it should be an A.
Alongside the relevant and controversial dramas of the Wednesday play, another strain of documentary drama also flourished at the BBC in the 1960s. At first, Ken Russell's biographies of composers such as Delius again faced great opposition for mixing documentary and drama.
Yes, just a little excitement.
Now, John, play it all.
Well, that was immediately frowned upon by the authorities, who said, well, this isn't true documentary.
Yes, that's it. Against F sharp and A, next bar, first violins.
When I wanted to show Prokofiev writing music, because there was no shot in existence of him writing music, even though I was going to show just a hand writing music, this was frowned upon and thought to be untrue and discrediting the true value of documentary, that if I was allowed to do this, then people wouldn't believe that the film had any truth whatsoever. I could never understand this, and gradually we overcame this thing.
No, you forgot the pizzicato in the basses. Yes. That's it, very good.
The power of this information could never have been communicated in a straight interview. The poetic truth of it could only be achieved through film. And so that is why I do consider a dramatized documentary to be the best way of arriving at the truth.
In the 70s and 80s, television journalists have increasingly enlisted the aid of dramatized reconstruction to tell important stories their documentary crews could not get at, like the Soviet invasion of Czechoslovakia and the secret Moscow negotiations which followed behind closed doors in the Kremlin. Most recently, the birth of solidarity in Poland was recreated by drama documentary makers in several countries, producing an international crop of Lech Wałęsa lookalikes.
We have the right to strike!
In the 1970s, the docudrama became an essential part of the American television diet. Holocaust, the story of one Jewish family during the Nazi terror, gripped a vast American audience. But when the series was screened on German television, something unique and remarkable happened.
Thousands and thousands of people have phoned to make personal confessions. It's true, I have seen it. And this had been really the first time in Germany that Germans told us, as if they say something very amazing, it's true, I have seen it. And then they said, and the whole time I didn't discuss it with my wife or with my children. The whole time yes, they had been silent the whole time. And you know, the German society had been silent from 1945. It was usual to say Hitler, this was this guy who built the Autobahn and who slaughtered the Jews. And the second he shouldn't have done.
Those telephone confessions and the extraordinary impact of Holocaust in unlocking German feelings about the Nazi horror is an unparalleled example of the power of television drama to touch a mass audience in a way no other kind of television can quite match.
I had seen a lot of programs in German television which had been made with more accuracy, with more brain, with more delicacy. But this had been the first time I'd moved in my stomach. The other times I'd been moved in my head, in my brain. This impact had been because it is a Hollywood drama, and it is made with all those maybe cheap means. I don't care whether they are cheap or whether they are highbrow or lowbrow. These are the ways of telling a story, the traditional means of telling a story.
It's only a shower, just for 5 minutes. It will clean you up and kill the lice.
You don't look from the outside on other people going in the gas chamber, you go for yourself. I think this is a secret of this Hollywood production.
Roi, obéissant au grand roi!
Alongside the boom in documentary drama, a very different kind of play has survived, fed by older traditions and relishing the artificiality of television. French television has boldly staged Greek drama. Japanese television has commissioned the poetic dramas of Soichiro Sasaki, like the delicate evocation of a piano tuner's obsession with sound and memory. Czech television has touchingly expressed the loss of childhood innocence.
Nezlob se.
Chytí pevně oběma rukama. No. I statečný platí za chyby smrti.
Bude jí to bolet.
Teď už ne. Všechny svý síly dala do boje. Teď už žádný nemá, ty si jí přemohl a ona to ví, že prohrála. Teď už by se jenom trápila.
I'd use them so that heaven's vaults should crack.
British television has continued to re-explore Shakespeare.
She's gone forever. You know when one is dead and when one lives, she's dead as earth.
Plays should be plays. They shouldn't seek to be anything else. Shouldn't be documentaries. They shouldn't be drama docs. Whatever problems, issues, political stances emerge out of a play should emerge out of it being a play.
She lives.
So plays ought to point their finger and say, this is the frame. Look at the frame. As well as through the window, realize that it is a window with a frame and that what's on the other side isn't the real world.
She's lying when she says, I love you. I know it, but what am I to do? Though she makes me cry, I don't care, for I love her.
The most ambitious example of Dennis Potter's vision of imaginative television drama was the series Pennies from Heaven, which mixed vintage popular songs and a tragic love story in a quite new way.
Sung by a woman, she has a heart of stone. Not human, but she must be my own. Till the day I die, I'll be loving my woman.
People do watch with an unusual kind of attention, and something in their innards gets churned, the better the work. But I think art changes, art operates.
We need the money, honey.
I was just astonished at the number of people who, quite often aggressively, would accuse me of Dennis Potter or Dennis Potter of changing their lives. And I remember somebody came back from a party and saying, "You're the man who ended my affair." And I said, "Oh, I don't think we've actually met till now." And what she meant was that her boyfriend had been so traumatized by identifying with Arthur Parker in Pennies from Heaven that he left and walked out.
I mean, for me, plays should be about the anxieties, yearnings, perceptions, and hopes that I feel as a human being relating to my family and friends and other human beings, and the things that I shut out of my mind as well.
While audiences around the world tune in to consume the big-budget series from Britain and America, questions remain about the prospects for serious drama on television.
Like the wingless aeroplane, it shouldn't exist in terms of logic and economics and pressures. It exists contrary to all the logic in that it doesn't justify itself primarily on grounds of either profit or, as compared to, say, Dallas or Coronation Street audience
rating.
I do regret the attitude that has become very prevalent in British television of, can we, will they understand this in Kansas? Can we sell this to America?
Why isn't the quality there? What's happened to the quality? I think generally it can be traced to an understandable but regrettable emphasis on the buck. The bottom line is the buck, and Hollywood is absolutely guilty of that and has been always.
It will never happen by accident in the sense that popular television almost can happen by accident. It's a commodity. This is not a commodity in anything like the same way. It's a necessary ingredient, but it only continues if there are enough people who, sometimes against their own interests, are persuaded to go on doing it.
But death, you understand? Death. Death has passed my way and put this flower in my mouth.
In just over 50 years, television drama has grown from a flickering face to a multi-million-dollar spectacular about the end of the world. In Shechti village, the Indian bride-burning drama reaches its climax. Unexpected visitors interrupt the attempt to murder the young bride. One of them is the bride's father, but the village playwright has a message for his viewers.
ના બાપુ હું ઘેર નહીં આવું જીવીશ તોય મરીશ તોય અહીં જ રહીશ લડીશ પણ ઘેર તો નહીં જાઉં.
Next online, a touching